Story 1. Once, nestled deep in the heart of a remote forested valley, stood Hollowbrook House, a place that locals dared not approach, a house that had been abandoned for decades. Rumors of its malevolence echoed through the town, and the twisted, gnarled trees surrounding it cast eerie, elongated shadows. Some said it was cursed, others believed it to be haunted, and a few declared it was home to something far more sinister. Hollowbrook House had a history steeped in darkness, and its very walls seemed to exhale a bitter, chilling wind. Generations of locals knew to avoid the place after sundown, as those who dared to enter its decaying halls never returned, at least not as the same person they once were. One autumn evening, a car approached the ominous mansion. Inside was Emily, a skeptical investigative journalist who thrived on debunking supernatural phenomena. She had received a tip about Hollowbrook House from an anonymous source. Despite her usual skepticism, there was something about this tip that had piqued her curiosity. Perhaps it was the allure of the unknown, or the challenge of proving that the paranormal was nothing but a figment of the imagination. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie light on the dilapidated structure. Emily stepped out of her car, her footsteps the only sound in the silent night. She had brought her camera, recording equipment, and a heart full of skepticism. But as she approached the house, an unshakable feeling of dread settled over her. The door, once grand but now barely hanging on its hinges, creaked ominously as she entered. The air inside was heavy, filled with dust and the scent of decay. The hallway was lined with family portraits, their eyes following her as she moved deeper into the house. The first night was uneventful, and Emily found herself fighting off disappointment. She set up recording equipment in various rooms, but the only sounds captured were the rustling of the old trees outside and the scurrying of rodents within the walls. She began to question the authenticity of the stories surrounding Hollowbrook House. It wasn't until the second night that things took a sinister turn. Emily was awakened by a soft, mournful melody echoing through the house. She followed the sound to the grand piano in the drawing room, and there she saw it. The keys were moving on their own, producing an eerie tune that sent shivers down her spine. She recorded the ghostly performance, unable to explain it through any rational means. Over the next few days, the occurrences multiplied. Shadows moved of their own accord, whispered voices echoed through the halls, and Emily often felt as though unseen eyes were watching her. The journalist who had once been a skeptic now found herself questioning her own beliefs. Late one night, Emily awoke to find herself in a nightmare. The walls of her bedroom seemed to throb, and the room was filled with a mournful wailing. She felt a presence beside her, a cold, unseen hand brushing against her cheek. Panicking, she turned on the light, and the room fell silent. She was left with nothing but the echoes of her racing heart. The entity that dwelled in Hollowbrook House seemed to feed on Emily's fear and uncertainty. It reveled in her growing terror, and its manifestations became more malevolent with each passing day. Emily's skepticism had transformed into a desperate desire to find answers. In her research, Emily uncovered the tragic history of Hollowbrook House. It was once the residence of the Hollowbrook family, who had mysteriously vanished without a trace. The town believed they had left in the dead of night, but Emily suspected a far more sinister fate. With her investigation closing in on the truth, the malevolent entity that haunted the house grew increasingly hostile. It left chilling messages scrawled on the walls in crimson, blood-like paint. Emily was running out of time, and her every move was met with resistance from the restless spirit. Desperate to lay the spirit to rest, Emily decided to conduct a seance. She reached out to a local medium, an old woman with knowledge of the supernatural. Together, they ventured into the heart of the haunted house. As they sat in the dimly lit drawing room, they began the seance. The medium's voice trembled as she made contact with the entity. It identified itself as Lucius Hollowbrook, the eldest son of the family. Through the medium, Lucius revealed the tragic tale of his family's demise. Years ago, Lucius had discovered a hidden passage beneath the house that led to a cavernous underground chamber. In the chamber, he found a cursed amulet, one that promised power and riches but came at a terrible cost. Greed and temptation led him to take the amulet, which unleashed a malevolent force that consumed the Hollowbrook family. Lucius's spirit had been bound to the house, unable to find rest until the amulet was destroyed. The entity's anger and despair had grown over the years, leading to its tormenting of anyone who dared to enter the house. As the seance continued, Emily and the medium could sense Lucius's torment. He yearned for forgiveness and release from the curse that had haunted him for so long. With the medium's guidance, Emily set out to find the cursed amulet and end the malevolence that had plagued Hollowbrook House. After days of searching, they discovered the amulet, hidden deep within the underground chamber. It was an ornate, dark artifact that seemed to pulse with an evil energy. Emily hesitated for a moment, fearing the consequences of its destruction. But with the spirit's pleading echoing in her mind, she shattered the amulet. An otherworldly shriek filled the chamber, and the malevolent force that had held the Hollowbrook family in its grip dissipated into nothingness. The house seemed to sigh in relief, its very walls relaxing. The shadows that once haunted the hallways withdrew, and the mournful wailing ceased. Lucius's spirit appeared one last time, but this time he wore a look of gratitude before fading away into the unknown. With the curse lifted, Hollowbrook House began to change. Its ominous atmosphere was replaced with a sense of peace. Emily had uncovered the truth, brought closure to a tormented spirit, and transformed the haunted house into a place that no longer held fear and despair. As she left Hollowbrook House for the last time, Emily couldn't help but reflect on the unpredictability of life. She had come to the house as a skeptic, seeking a sensational story, but had left with a profound respect for the unknown and a belief in the lingering spirits of the past. Hollowbrook House would forever remain a chapter in her life that challenged her beliefs and left her with an unshakable fascination for the unexplained. Story 2. In the quiet town of Willowbrook, nestled amid ancient oaks and weeping willows, stood an imposing Victorian mansion known as Willow House. It was a place shrouded in mystery and fear, a mansion that had been abandoned for generations. The whispers of the townsfolk spoke of the strange occurrences that had plagued the house, and it had become a place where darkness reigned. Sophie, a curious young writer with a fascination for the supernatural, had heard the tales of Willow House since her childhood. Her grandmother had shared stories of the house, passed down through generations, about a malevolent spirit that haunted its halls. Sophie had always believed in the power of a good story, but the allure of a real-life ghost tale beckoned her to the doorstep of Willow House. One crisp autumn day, Sophie arrived at the edge of Willow House's property. The mansion loomed like a dark sentinel, its ivy-covered walls and broken windows telling tales of abandonment and neglect. She had brought her notebook, camera, and a heart full of determination to uncover the truth behind the whispers. As she stepped across the threshold, the air grew icy, and Sophie felt as though the house itself was aware of her presence. Cobwebs draped the ornate furniture, and the creaking floorboards groaned under her footsteps. The long-forgotten echoes of laughter and joy seemed to linger in the corners of the house, a stark contrast to the chilling tales of horror. The first few days were uneventful, and Sophie began to question her quest. She set up her recording equipment in various rooms, but only captured the wind's mournful howls and the scurrying of unseen critters. She couldn't help but wonder if Willow House was just another abandoned mansion, its eerie reputation a product of overactive imaginations. Her skepticism was tested one stormy night. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Sophie lay in her bed, peering into the darkness. She had always found solace in the rain, but this night was different. The raindrops against the window pane seemed to form words, whispering secrets from the past. She recorded the phenomenon, her heart racing with a mixture of dread and excitement. Over the following days, the supernatural occurrences intensified. Shadows moved of their own accord, whispered voices echoed through the halls, and Sophie often felt as though unseen eyes watched her every move. The journalist who had once been a skeptic now found herself immersed in the inexplicable. One fateful night, as Sophie lay in her room, an invisible presence settled at the foot of her bed. The bedclothes tugged at her, and she was frozen in terror. The spectral figure of a woman materialized before her, her eyes filled with sorrow. With trembling hands, Sophie turned on the light, and the room fell silent, leaving her to question her sanity. The entity that dwelled in Willow House seemed to feed on Sophie's fear and curiosity. It reveled in her growing fascination and confusion, and its manifestations became more sinister with each passing day. Sophie's skepticism had transformed into a desperate desire to find answers. Through research in Old Town records, Sophie uncovered the dark history of Willow House. It was once the residence of the Hawthorne family, a prominent family in the town. The family had been destroyed by a series of tragic events, including a fire that claimed their youngest daughter, Amelia. The apparition that haunted the house was believed to be the spirit of Amelia Hawthorne, who had died in the flames that had consumed the mansion. Sophie began to suspect that Amelia's spirit was trapped in Willow House, unable to move on to the afterlife. Desperate to uncover the truth, Sophie decided to conduct a séance. She reached out to a local medium, a woman with a reputation for communicating with the other side. Together, they ventured into the heart of the haunted mansion. As they sat in the dimly lit parlor, they began the séance. The medium's voice quivered as she made contact with the spirit. It identified itself as Amelia, and her presence was palpable. Through the medium, Amelia revealed her tragic fate, her death in the fire, and her yearning to be reunited with her family. As Sophie listened to Amelia's sorrowful tale, she could feel the young girl's presence in the room. Her heart ached for Amelia, who had been trapped in Willow House for so long, unable to find peace. With the medium's guidance, Sophie set out to help Amelia move on to the afterlife. They conducted a ritual that allowed Amelia to say her final goodbyes to her family, who had long since passed away. With tearful farewells, Amelia's spirit dissipated, and the malevolent presence that had haunted Willow House for generations was banished. The house itself seemed to sigh with relief, and the atmosphere transformed. The shadows that once tormented Sophie retreated, and the ominous whispers ceased. As she left Willow House for the last time, Sophie couldn't help but reflect on the powerful bond between the living and the departed. She had come to the house as a skeptic, searching for a story, but had left with a profound respect for the spirits that may linger in the world, waiting for their stories to be heard and their pain to be acknowledged. Willow House, once a place of darkness, had found redemption, and Sophie had been a part of its journey toward peace. Story 3. Nestled at the edge of a gloomy forest, Ravenwood Manor stood as a somber testament to a past filled with secrets and suffering. For decades, the old mansion had been abandoned, shrouded in mystery and fear. The locals whispered stories of its dark history and the malevolent presence that lurked within its walls, rendering it a place that no one dared to enter. Ella, a young paranormal investigator with a fascination for the supernatural, had heard of Ravenwood Manor's sinister reputation for years. She had a reputation for debunking haunted houses and was eager to expose the truth behind this one. As night fell, she approached the looming mansion, determined to find the evidence that would finally put an end to the local tales. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the decaying structure. The air was heavy with a sense of foreboding as Ella crossed the threshold. Cobwebs clung to the ornate chandeliers, and the creaking floorboards groaned underfoot. The manor seemed to breathe, and its walls appeared to bear witness to untold horrors. The first few nights were disappointingly uneventful, and Ella began to question whether Ravenwood Manor's reputation was merely a product of superstition. She set up her recording equipment in various rooms, capturing only the hushed rustle of the wind and the distant cries of night creatures. Her skepticism grew stronger with each passing day. But then, on the fourth night, the atmosphere in the house changed. Ella awoke to a soft, eerie melody echoing through the mansion's dark corridors. She followed the haunting music, which led her to an old, dusty grand piano. To her astonishment, the keys moved on their own, producing a haunting tune. She recorded the inexplicable performance, a sense of dread settling deep in her chest. Over the following days, the paranormal activity intensified. Shadows danced on the walls, whispered voices reverberated through the halls, and Ella often felt as though unseen eyes were watching her. Her skepticism transformed into fascination and fear. Late one night, Ella was jolted awake by an unsettling presence beside her bed. The room was bathed in an otherworldly cold light, and a spectral figure loomed over her, its features twisted in anguish. Ella's heart raced as the entity extended an ethereal hand toward her. Terrified, she reached for the light switch, and the room fell into silence. The entity that inhabited Ravenwood Manor seemed to feed on Ella's fear, and its manifestations grew more malevolent with each passing day. Ella was no longer the skeptic who had entered the mansion. She was now determined to uncover the truth. Through her research, Ella uncovered the tragic history of Ravenwood Manor. It had once belonged to the Winfield family, whose wealth and power had masked their dark secrets. The journals and letters she discovered told a story of betrayal, deceit, and a terrible curse that had befallen the family. It was said that the curse was born of the family's greed and had claimed the life of the youngest Winfield daughter, Isabella. Her restless spirit was believed to be the malevolent force that now haunted the manor, seeking vengeance on her family and anyone who dared to enter. Determined to free the tortured spirit and uncover the truth, Ella decided to conduct a seance. She reached out to a renowned medium, a woman with the ability to communicate with the other side. Together, they ventured into the heart of the haunted mansion. In a dimly lit parlor, they began the seance. The medium's voice trembled as she made contact with the spirit. Isabella's presence filled the room, and through the medium, she revealed the tragic tale of her family's betrayal, her own death, and her yearning for justice. The curse that bound her to the mansion had grown stronger with time, and her anger had festered. Ella listened with a heavy heart as the medium relayed Isabella's story. She realized that the only way to break the curse and free Isabella's spirit was to confront the truth of the Winfield family's betrayal and exact justice for the young girl. With the medium's guidance, Ella uncovered evidence of the betrayal and deceit that had led to Isabella's death. The curse was born of treachery, and the only way to lift it was to reveal the truth and seek justice for the wronged spirit. Together, they conducted a ritual that exposed the sins of the Winfield family and laid bare the injustice that had plagued Ravenwood Manor for generations. Isabella's spirit trembled with a mix of anger and sadness, and as the ritual reached its climax, her apparition dissipated, and the curse was finally broken. With the malevolent presence banished, Ravenwood Manor underwent a transformation. The oppressive atmosphere that had long haunted its halls began to lift, and the house seemed to sigh with relief. Ella had brought closure to a tormented spirit, and the haunted mansion was no longer a place of fear and despair. As she left Ravenwood Manor for the last time, Ella couldn't help but reflect on the power of confronting the past and seeking justice for those who had been wronged. She had come to the house as a skeptic, but she left with a deep respect for the spirits of the past and a belief in the possibility of redemption and release from the torment of a cursed existence. Ravenwood Manor, once a place of darkness, had finally found peace. and Ella had been a part of its journey toward liberation.